Hi, peace, everybody. I hope everybody's well. I just have to check one quick thing. Okay, good. And then a little bit of a reset. Let me find Dr. Jared Ball and one of his promos or outro. This is the outro, but I'll do the intro for just a quick reset.
Black Liberation Media is a collective of Black and African organizers, journalists, academics, and media personalities serving Black and African masses seeking to further grow in their understanding of themselves, their histories, and the African world through entertainment and news. Please continue to like, subscribe, and donate to the channel so we can further serve you and liberate our people. You can also go to blkliberationmedia.org, get some merchandise, and also become a Patreon member and a member from the YouTube. Please do what you can, share, and show your love as we will show ours for you. Black Liberation Media.
All right. Hey, peace, everybody. My name is Rosa Clemente, and I'm proud to be back and able to be back. I gave myself a little new title, the People's Journalist, especially in light of what has happened in like 10 days, which we'll get into more. My guest, Akuno, will be on in a few. So I wanted to welcome everybody. I really want to encourage, please, everybody on Instagram, follow Black Liberation Media and the show. So Kali Akuno, Executive Director of Cooperation Jackson, is going to be our guest. And listen, I'm going to play this remix of a folk song by Pete Seeger called Which Side Are You On? It's Rebel Diaz and Dead Prez. I think it's going to be okay to play it, but just in case, people just let me know if you can hear it, because sometimes YouTube will let you play it, but there's no sound. Okay. Oh, and I'm sharing the screen. And this is exactly why I need somebody that's a producer and no social media at the same time. Because now, here we go. Share my screen. All right, let's see.
We, the people, are the ones who gonna have to fight. We used to say, which side are you on? Which side are you on? The truth is, we're in so much debt that the only way out is revolution or war. So now the question is, which side are you on? On.
Which side are you on, boy? Which side are you on, my lord? Which side are you on, boy? Which side are you on, my lord?
See, before I draw the line, let me welcome you close to all the folks who knew Obama sold the people a hoax. Gave the money to suckers while our community still poor. Withdrew the troops but started another war. Colonizing, terrorizing, creating the oil crisis so they can make a killing on food and gas prices. Prisons is filling, they trying to lock up the future. Militarized borders and control of computers. Wanting stupid bumping music that ain't healthy for the shortest. Privatizing schools and policemen in the hallways. Can't be dormant, I'm awoken. Rise up, be ready. Brought the family with us and we hold the machetes.
Riding the fence. Too many people be riding the fence. Yeah, you say you ready for war, but are you convinced? I'm not convinced. If you're a rider, freedom fighter, crowd excited, then let's do this. We can make one big united, middle finger to the U.S. Give me the bravest and the truest. Fuck the hippest and the coolest. We gon' spark this revolution and cross this off our to-do list. Put your foot down if you look down on this criminal system. Put your book down and get shook down like my niggas in prison. Don't be condemning and condoning their actions in one sentence. Make up your mind, choose your side, as you a patriot. patriot or a menace to society. So riot or sit by quietly. But don't pull out your flag and try to say you gon' ride with me. You flip-flopping like hip-hop. I don't get locked in that trick box. Get got like Big and Pop. Shit's got to stop. I am the people, not the big. I repeat after Fred. So please blow my brains out if I ever forget.
I'm with the independent thinkers. I'm down with the movers and the shakers and the ex-Henny drinkers, the non-smokers, the health advocates, the non-voters, the young bloods in the hood training like soldiers. I'm on the side of the tracks with the hood gardens, the little child that don't color inside the margins. I don't ride the fence, I cultivate my strength, cause if it ain't about power, it don't make sense. I've been down with Boogie Down since BDP and Brown Pride, and Black Power make RBG. An OG told me choose battles wisely. In the struggle, don't forget your children and your wifey. If you don't see me on the podium preaching it, every day I hope my every action is teaching it. Cause revolution is a process, it's not a speech or a panel. Don't bite off more than you can handle.
Shot City, Palestina, Venezuela, the South Bronx, baby. Yo. Hey, yo, I still rock hard like slingshots in Palestina. Con todos los estudiantes por educación gratuita. I'm with workers uprising and the right to unionize. We ain't crossed the border, so you better legalize. I'm with La Peña del Bronx. I'm still Vitor Toro, cause gentrification is polluting my borough. So bro, never. South Bronx forever. Decolonize the block, make your neighborhood better. I ain't down with the rich, I'm more Richie Perez. Don't talk to grand juries or cooperate with feds. I'm with students, doctors, janitors, teachers. We need living wages, but they don't believe us. Monida, Barreto, Spofford, Hunts Point, my hood, I love, rejoin forces, forming our deck, BX, taking over buildings, rebel DIs for the children.
Politics to sickness, streets express symptoms, contemplated quickness, big business pimps. Scholars play the simpleton, fool play with wisdom. Who will stand and fight back? Who will play the victim? Trial tribulations, injured generations, stolen history and outsourced innovation. Babel Tower fell, tribes are at war. The story's not represented in the score. The game's fixed, most of the faces and names switched. Credit stolen from science, religion, language, technology, philosophy, and what strange is. They paid in hatred for the knowledge of the ancients. Power in words, actions, gun, swords. Aim, Panthers, brown berets, lords. Pick a side, one sickness, one cure, one love, one blood, one world, but one war.
Yeah. So I think Tommy would have told me if y'all couldn't hear it either. And obviously I moved, Instagram folks for it. Okay, so what? Oh, I'm gonna do my best to do comments, but I did want to, like, on 100, if anybody's down to volunteer to do my not my content, but to post it on social media or help me produce this show by, like, getting to younger folks and all of that, volunteer wise. But also, if you're a college student looking for an internship or a high school senior, hit me up. Let's make it happen. I'm also a professor, so I think it would go well. Okay, so Risa, thank you so much for dealing with, like, me being on or not being on. I am, I'm at the point in my life where I'm like, everybody, whatever, when my memoir comes out, everybody in my life would already say and know that that's what I wrote in my memoir. But when somebody in your family is sick, or let's say, like, people we know that have cancer, and then they're like, it's the best thing that could have happened to me. And what they most say is, like, I wish I would have spent more time with my children or traveling, right? What I think is that the activists and organizers of the hip hop generation, as Bakari Kitwana calls it, like before social media, we were always together or in tune, or like, had a big ass camera, or we didn't have cell phones and all of that, which led to people going to organizations to learn how to be an organizer, right? So I'm not like, 20 years ago, but it is true, 20 years ago. And now that we're here, right, and in this moment, that doesn't just impact us, it impacts the people of the world. Like, if the United States is a global power, then that means like what's going on everywhere else, So with that, I want young people to understand that, like, my generation was like, this is what we did. Y'all need to figure out quickly, how are you all going to communicate with each other? Because all of you've been raised is on like a phone, a smartphone. Because when whatever comes down, it might not come down till I'm 95. As a historian who has studied empires, all empires crumble. But you're talking empires for thousands of years. The United States particularly is not more than 400 years old in that sense, right? But the thing about historians, and the reason that us as historians are, I should have probably like full screen this, right? Sorry about that. I'm going to leave it like that just in case folks, ask a question. I can probably do both. That we're in the midst of an empire that's collapsing. And if the empire rules the world, then the world is collapsing, right? And in any history, I mean, let me just go on some Game of Thrones, right? Like, anybody who has watched Game of Thrones, although I will say that Game of Thrones, the dragon, is so much better than Games of Thrones, because the other one is like, how did they get these dragons and all the women were eating? That one thing you could see if you watch any kind of like movie or documentary around that time period before people were keeping time, is that these empires last for thousands of years. So then when you look at the United States, it's like it's been 400 years and it's collapsing. Well, what happens, right? Like in Game of Thrones, is like when the armies there or whatever, and they're killing all your people that live below the castle you live in, everybody's dying. And I think it's very hard for people to say, shit, that did not work. What is going to work? And I feel at some level that's something that everybody here watching can relate to. And I think it's important that also people understand the real issue of inflation right now. Like, ask me 30 years ago if I was understanding capitalism, but I was like, oh, inflation, I can't afford anything. And now I'm like, oh my God. Like many of you go to the gas station, it changes every other day. Food. I live in Albany, New York, and I'm straight paying $6 for avocados. So then I think it's like everybody else, especially in LA, is like $6. That's mad cheap. Dependent on where you geographically are located, it is mad cheap. And I think with Lanao, what you're saying is right. So finally, I'm back in the classroom. 3 classes, I can teach again, be with young people. The first thing I'm going to do is like, you need to tell me, as this generation, how COVID impacted you. Because COVID impacting that generation, that includes my daughter. It was kind of crazy. At one time, I realized I never had to regulate a curfew with my daughter because they don't go out. And if they hang out, they bring a couple of girls home, but that's it. And then I was like, yo, I was raking every curfew. My mom was always ready. Like, don't lie to me. And Generation Z didn't have that. And then the students in the last years that have graduated from colleges or universities, right? Like, they can't find jobs. And then here comes a new generation, well, again, Gen Z, who's also now saying, we don't want to be in this social media hellscape. And the things we had as a hip hop generation was the radio, one cassette tape. You listen to WBLS if you lived in the state of New York or New York City, and then you press the button. One day, my daughter was like, Mom, what is that? I'm like, it's a record player. She was like, what are records? And I was like, oh my God, like, we are here. But remember, during COVID, this generation also witnessed the protests that began with George Floyd. And they're also like the Black Lives Matter era babies that have been born. And listen, I tell everybody who has children, and I know all my comrades who have children, like, you can't lie to them. Like, they're gonna know. And then once we're engaging in movement work, and movements are also family, our children, like, until they're about 14, are like, they know all of it, the politics, the prison industrial complex, and all of that. So they know that. Then COVID, George Floyd, no jobs, and the larger picture, the empire collapsing. And when the empire collapses, it takes us first. The flip side of all that is, and why I brought up Game of Thrones, that no matter what happened and who got killed in Game of Thrones, there was one person that would observe everything, that the thousands of troops were not allowed to kill that person because they're recording it, the memory, the history. And that's why they come after the historians and the teachers. And right now they're coming out organizers in all the ways. And I don't know what mechanism, but it's not breaking through the noise, right? And lastly, before I bring Kali on, right, like, here we are. I think everybody's trying to do the best that they can. But I'm also like, when people say some dumb shit, we got to talk about that too. So I'm going to add Kali Akuno, one of the co-directors of Cooperation Jackson. And I mean, this is my whole thing. I'm like, Kali, like at 2 a.m, I'm like, yo, dude, like, am I wrong? And he's like, no, you're not wrong. But you need to like talk about it in a different perspective, So listen, this is what happened. I'm gonna share this. Okay, I'm just gonna keep. This is why I need a producer to help me. But you know what? Let me just bring and focus on Kali right now. Okay. Okay. So basically, fam, August 9th, 2026. Legit, I don't watch any more Sunday morning shows. It was a detox. It was harder to not watch Sunday morning shows and to stop like smoking weed. I was like a junkie on politics of the bullshit of all of it. And then one day, like 6 weeks, I was like, yeah, I'm done. But August 9th, 2026 of this year was the 12th year, the commemoration of Mike Brown being gunned down by Darren Wilson, and how the Ferguson police, in the hottest of summers, let Mike Brown's body there for hours. And the first thing I remember was I saw an Instagram post by Tef Poe where he said, this is Michael Brown's stepfather. So if you Google it right now, then you see Michael Brown's stepfather, which is like old school cardboard, like the police just killed my stepson. And then like within 2 days, we start getting the images of tanks in Ferguson, But the year before that was also the acquittal of George Zimmerman. And for Latinos, link this up when you're listening to me of Zimmerman, who's from Peru, who clearly, if he was in one of the white neighborhoods, somebody would have came after him. And also Zimmerman, and people like, oh, I'm like, dude, he's from Peru. And that's the worst part of it. And that's why we have to address these anti-Black sentiments, because then the larger African American community in this country is be like, this is why we think y'all are anti-Black. So 3 days later, I read, and I have it in the link on Substack, Guardian of the Guardian, US-based Guardian, the online magazine, and Jerica basically was like, Mamdani and the AOC are kind of pushing and not fighting around defunding the police or abolition, and why progressives should care. And when I read it, I said, oh no, we all need to care. So I did my article. And what I'm saying in it is this. The fact that AOC in a 20-minute interview could laugh about woke one was crazy. All those things we said was just in the pandemic. And then you would figure maybe the dude, the mayor from New York City would be like, oh no, this Black Lives Matter, George Floyd and all that. He doubles down and he's like, oh, we're happy to work with the police, the NYPD. And then this past Thursday, the Justice Committee and other hardcore grassroots organizations that are not about police reform, they're at other levels, are putting out press statements like, this dude threw us under the bus. And I said to myself, out of all the issues, they didn't throw housing, they didn't throw education, student loan, workers' rights. Because as a Democratic or a socialist, you already roll with that. So the fact that it was so easy for them to just be like, woke and crazy. We're not going to be abolishing the police. We're working with our partners. And I was like, yo, that's mad anti-Black. I'm going to tell you, as I bring Kali on, I woke up yesterday to so many crazy threats that I deleted the original post and changed the title. And then one of my girls was like, girl, you're Rosa, take it back to where you had it. And I said, and I don't remember any time in my life where I'm like, oh, let me change the title. And then what I realized as a Boricua, especially because so many of the hateful shit came from Boricuas, I was like, this is why we need to be independent, because colonized lands and colonized minds. And then I was like, yo, she's about to run for president. Do you want to piss off every African-American woman? Because you don't get the presidency. And then I just realized that, as usual, politicians lie. They trying to come on the come up. They throw us under the bus. But as a Black Puerto Rican, if I'm the only one, I'm not letting that ride. Because you ask any African-American person in this country, what is that you fear most is policing and the state apparatus, organizers, activists, and then ICE. So you threw the thing that every Black or Latinx person who phenotypically looks Black or brown has to go somewhere and like study. Okay, yo, this shit goes down, we're going to the left. And I'm talking about ICE, where people are like figuring out who comes out the house. Yeah, I was in a menopausal I'm in menopause. I have flashes all the time, but these hot flashes, I was like, oh, hell to the no. And of course, I'm like, Kali, can you come on? And now, Kali. Woo. I mean, I have to say, I'm still on fire. And then Kali's like, but you already know this. Think about it. So first and foremost, thank you, Kali, for being here. I would know it was last minute. It was a lot. I mean, also the DSA is hella white, and I think people are not realizing that either. And like a lot of them got money. Ooh. When you saw those comments, I'm sure you were like, absolutely, this is what happens. How do we kind of us, the folks, especially the Boricuas that are, I see people now going, right, I get it. I don't like this. I don't like that. First, is this something that we should be like all in on? And because some people are like, there's a lot of other issues happening. How do you connect that? And it's like pointing out that if you're going to talk about not abolishing the police, actually giving the police more money, for me, I think you're anti-Black because that's the agent for 400 years of African descendants being trafficked and enslaved have to deal with every day.
Well, let me say this, Rosa, that I'm glad you stuck with the original title, and I'm glad you stuck with your guns on this, and I want to encourage you to keep doing that. It is definitely going to, lower your popularity and your reach, at least for a minute. But if somebody's not checking the record, and as you say, trying to hold them accountable, then these egregious statements will just continue to pass on, and they get away with them, and she's made plenty before this, but it's not that I think a number of activists, at least I know of folks I know in New York, they're not necessarily letting it slide. But, given that we are all in a period where we're being inundated with just threats and challenges and contradictions on a daily, folks are having to really pick and choose, like, well, what issue am I going to focus on? Because, the MAGA's flood the zone strategy is very effective, and we should not act as if it isn't, right? It's like a sensory overload, it's a political overload, and people can't respond to every particular thing. So at some point, when our movement gets its act together and we come up with real and coherent kind of division of labor in the movement, people can be very clear about, if something goes on in this arena, these are the folks we know are going to respond to it, right? We expect them to do that. We encourage them to do that because of their positionality, because of their expertise, because of their experience, etc. So I want to, thank you for honing in on all those different things relative to your own experience and what you can bring and do bring to the table for the movement, right? But I do want to say this, Rosa, just, there's a key piece to this that you mentioned that I want to bring back up as to why her and Mamdani, who potentially could either be running mates, at least in the DSA kind of wet dream, or, they could be rivals, right? That depends on how a couple of different things play out, right? But if she's seriously considering running for the Democratic Party nomination, who does she have to be loyal to in order to secure that nomination? Whose politics does she have to bend towards in order to be accepted on the team? It ain't my politics. It ain't your politics. It's the politics of the Democratic National Committee. And so, the more and more she is kind of believing the hype, and that's what it is at this point, I must have to say, believing the hype, and some people are kind of gassing her head up, for a number of different reasons, you're going to see her move more and more to the right in order to be, quote unquote, more mainstream, to appear more responsible, to appear more mature, to be somebody who, they feel can have the keys to the kingdom and won't mess it up for empire. Because we have to remember, the Democratic Party is an instrument of U.S. imperialism. Now, I would say, unfortunately, it has some forces within its kind of broad tent approach. I'm not going to call it a coalition, but under its broad tent approach, who believe that there is a place for them, and don't necessarily grapple with the reality. There is a place for your vote. There is not a place for you and your politics and views. And the DSA is finding that out the hard way. Now they have made some pretty significant gains, at least in the primaries. Let's be clear about that. I mean, they have won a few actual races, but right now there's a lot of hype around the primaries. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't, be promoting their politics and their issues. They are. But are they doing so in a way that is really preparing both their membership and the broader public for the anti-communist assault that is going to come from MAGA and being reinforced by key elements within the Democratic Party's national leadership? I would argue with you, they are not prepared for that, nor are they preparing the public for that. And you see that in the wishy-washy statements and the wishy-washy positions that folks are taking. So like the woman in, what was that, Michigan?
Yes. Yeah, Michigan.
Bernie.
Yeah.
Bernie and AOC at the last minute basically just threw her under the bus, wouldn't give her an endorsement, right?
Yeah.
When she was kind of holding the line probably more than anybody else, but because of some, she wouldn't disavow herself, as I understand it. I'm sure there was more to it. I didn't pay that much attention, but she wouldn't disavow herself from some controversial, YouTubers, right? Social media influencers, who were part of the woke one movement, whatever the hell that means or wherever it came from, that they, would not give her the final endorsement, which means they made a clear concession towards, supporting the DNC, right, Democratic National Committee, in that particular piece towards kind of a party unity. And it's the party unity piece that I want to uphold, because that's where it gets back to some of these pieces around Black people and Latinos. They figure.
Yeah, and I want to play.
Let me finish this point, because I think it's critical to your point.
Yeah, no. I mean, I'm sorry. Go ahead. No,
because what they figure on is that we do not have anywhere else to go.
Right.
There is no political instrument that exists that is going to represent even some modicum of our interests. So I can run roughshod and throw you under the bus consistently, because at the end of the day, you're going to show up if you show up, right? And that's becoming more of a challenge, right? And a lot of folks, particularly young folks, are both engaged to some new degrees, but it still don't change the fact that 50% of the folks who could vote in this empire don't vote on a consistent basis, and that's over a long period of time. But they figure that those folks who do show up to the polls, Black and Latino folks who show up at the polls and who consistently voted within the Democratic Party, they do so because they know you ain't got no place else to go. So you're going to continually get disrespected unless there's a political cost, right, for your vote. And AOC is just, and Mamdani are both kowtowing to that political reality, that political fact. They can diss us because there is no political cost to dissing us.
Yeah, and this is going to feed right in, so I could have people watch. It was a 20-minute interview, which I was also like, 20 minutes on a Sunday morning show, that's never happened. So I was like, this is fascinating on that issue alone. I want to play for people that exact. Okay.
Clip. Right.
It's my bad. I have got to share the screen so we don't come out of focus. So let's share that. All right, here we go. So everybody just like listen. That's what I'm going to say. Listen.
I'm sure you've seen. I mean, she's, the Thanksgiving dust up. She says she doesn't, don't believe that, but the abolish prisons, abolish police, which is also positions that have been taken by a lot of the progressive candidates who have won.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get around that? I mean, those are not positions that are supported by most of America.
I mean, I think that a lot of these races, even right now, they'll have a tendency to be nationalized.
Yeah.
But these races ultimately are local, and all politics are local. My understanding is that that Francesca Hong has made clear her present stances to her electorate.
Yeah, she's moved away from a lot of that.
Right, she's moved away from it. And I have a local city councilman that has this saying, woke one was crazy.
Woke one was crazy. Okay, that's
and I think that what's important is that we have to assess what
was it. I mean, did the movement go too
now.
far with some of those positions? I mean, you briefly supported the idea of defunding the police.
Well, I think that during this time and especially during COVID, there was a huge opening of the Overton window. We were shut down. There was some of the highest unemployment rates that we have seen because of those shutdowns.
Yeah.
And I think that the doors were really open in trying to entertain any and every policy that was going to get us to a better place. And I actually think that the discussions that were had in that time were quite fruitful. I think that when we talk about crime today, it's fundamentally different than the way that we talked about crime in bringing crime down, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that we all share in the goals of having as low a crime rate as possible. I think that, during lockdown, of course, rhetoric in that time is not rhetoric that we would use today. And I'm grateful that these candidates have the opportunity to present who they are to their electorate and what they're campaigning on in this moment.
Yeah, rhetoric. That's what got me hot. At the end, I was like, this is crazy. Rhetoric implies you're like in a room just like talking shit with your people. Not about like, although people right now are like, word. And that's the whole thing. That she felt comfortable enough to do that during COVID. You mean COVID where Black people still went in a pandemic? I'm like, that's right there when I was like, oh, that's anti-Black. Again, people asking. If you look at the history of African descendant people in this community, enslaved people for 400 years, you're going to throw under the bus the exact mechanism that started during slavery to catch enslaved people who had fled their condition. And that's a joke?
Yes, Rosa.
Right. No, go ahead.
I mean, I'm not trying to be contrary at all, but let's remember they brought her on to do what she did. Right? That instrument, which is an instrument of the Democratic Party, right? She showed up to elevate her status within the contest, to elevate her status within the realms of the party, to go from, the fringes of where she once was into more of the heart of the party, and one of their primetime instruments. And she had to do that. The very fact that she was there, she was brought there to do that, to deliver that message. And we doing more of a freestyle thing, but you've been on some of them shows before, right? Within the mainstream media.
On ABC News.
Well, I'm just saying you've been on, some of the prime time pieces.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And they will try to throw you a few curveballs, but they give you the questions ahead of time. And anybody know, like any of those politicians, they did a pre-interview and then another pre-interview. They talked to her aides. The aides came back with, these are the different subjects. She don't want to go here. She's comfortable in saying that. They do a practice run. I'm going to say it a little bit like this, or, you might want to do this. Or that is all orchestrated. Ain't nothing there freestyle in the similar sense of what we're doing. So I'm just wanting the folks to know from direct experience, she was brought there to deliver that particular message. Like that was the point. So and like if we got to throw, folks under the bus, then so be it, right? But and remember, this is in the context of what I was saying. She was in there, brought what they and I think trying to use her for in particular right now, both here and in other places I've seen her at, right? When you kind of gave me a heads up that you wanted, to talk about this, went and looked at a couple of things, just within the last 24 hours, just to make sure I had, some grounding of what she's done. Her in particular, what she's done. I've been much more up on Mamdani, but she is being positioned right now to be the bridge between
old and the
DSA, right. She's positioned to be the bridge, right? And the DNC is making certain clear demands, right? And we need you to apply it over so that we can bring at the end of the day, come November in the midterms, and trying to project towards 2028, that we can keep the big tent for the ballot registry. We can keep that big tent coalition to ensure maximum turnout under this kind of appeal that at the end of the day, we want, they're going to still make the claim of vote blue no matter who. That's clearly not what they're demonstrating. The DNC is clearly not demonstrating that. So now they got to set the table of like, if we got to come to a middle, but the middle is going to bend to the right. And if y'all not willing to bend to the right, then we're going to find ways to get rid of y'all. We're going to primary you out when we can. Or, it's already DNC related. And I include APAC as one of those, who've already made it clear that in the general election come November, the money that they spent to try to get some of the DSA folks out in support of other Democratic candidates, they're going to give that money to Republicans, right? To ensure that anybody who doesn't hold a line that's consistent with their position and their interests does not get elected, even if that person is an open fascist, right? And we got to bring it back to a particular point that's beyond her, like what what Hakeem, I never want to call him.
Jeffries.
That was a slip, but Jeffries, right? Him coming out of saying, I ain't for Medicare for all, I ain't for health care for all, and I'm not for the DSA agenda, kind of throwing down the gauntlet. Now let's think about it objectively. If you're not for those things, then what are you objectively for?
Right.
Particularly in alignment with the current regime and what its politics are. You have placed yourself more in alignment with them than you've done with most of what your own base has been clamoring for and demanding for quite some time now. Because you look at all of their own polling mechanisms, tell them universal, health care is what the vast majority of folks who believe themselves to be Democrats, what they want. But you would never see that come up. So they're not interested in representing the interests of their own base, which is why so many of their folks are in part, kind of looking for some semblance of an alternative. They find it some modicum of that in DSA and going in that direction. But what we've seen in a couple of black races down here, right in the South,
New Orleans.
Down here is a couple of folks like what happened in New Orleans with this, how we got a white woman as mayor. Black folks didn't turn out.
Holly is referencing Jackson, Mississippi, in the South.
So folks didn't turn out to vote, right?
Yeah.
In just the threat of MAGA alone is not, enough, I think, to just get folks to vote blue no matter who. So this kind of whole projection that they are putting out that the Democrats are somehow, or at least they have an opportunity to take the Senate, and that there's going to be some sweep, some massive sweep of the House, that may turn out to be more fiction than actual fact, in part because of the gerrymandering, but also it's like, what are y'all encouraging folks to actually turn out and vote for when you're not presenting really any alternative and you're not coalescing to our demands? So we told you, defund the police as a minimum.
Right. Now it's the whole, it's absolutely no. And this is the thing too. this is like, I'm not even going to talk about this after tomorrow, right? Like, I was just like, okay, this for me was definitely the definitive, like, F all of the electoral political project. I'm good. Like, I had a moment where I was like, maybe to get Puerto Rico free, I'll run. And I'm like, F all of that. And really what definitely, like, it started with the quote water crisis in Puerto Rico. That's a colonial crisis. And then it went to these inane fucking dumbass like statements. And I'm like, girl, you're 54. Like, it's good. I want to leave that to everybody else. I'm going to leave all the nonprofit language of narratives and social justice, intersectionality, because our people are fucking dying. There are so many people that have died in ICE detention. I really want to ask Boricuas, like, really, because y'all the one coming after me the hardest. And with Bad Bunny, do you understand that you think you being a United States citizen is going to save you? You're going to get caught up. Maybe you'll die. I don't know. But maybe you won't. And then a day later, somebody's going to come and be like, oh, they're a Puerto Rican. They're a United States citizen. Like, it's not a water crisis in Puerto Rico, but it goes to, because you've been all over the world, everything you've been talking about within our movements about what happens when a climate catastrophe begins and is not going to end, right? So, fam, in Puerto Rico, like, the whole thing is basically the governor of Puerto Rico, who's one of the founders of Latinos for Trump. I mean, the corruption of the Puerto Rican kind of administrative government is insane, kind of thing. A green light to a project that for the last 3 years, people have been trying to stop. It's called Essentia, because all these white men and women were like, oh my God, I didn't know Puerto Rico was that beautiful. And wait, I can be a United States citizen. I got to pay taxes. I'm in that. We're now heading on a commemoration of 10 years since Maria, which then you see like younger generations and feminist organizations have been doing the work of mutual aid and self-determination, the work that Cooperative Jackson is, everybody's mirroring that work, right? And like, Bad Bunny still wants to do his show. And I was like, fam, literally, he's going to do his show in an arena that had electricity and water. And half a mile down from the arena, people online for water. So, like, the AOC thing was like, good, one, done. Everybody take my Black Puerto Rican Radical Tradition seminar where I break this down. But right now, the empire falling means the colony of Puerto Rico is falling. And the amount of just not grassroots understanding and work, or maybe people who are not respecting the Boricuas on the ground, that us in the diaspora, we're not in the island, so we shouldn't really be saying anything except what the people on the ground are saying. And what's happening in Puerto Rico is water shortage, right? But it's on purpose, because if you go to Puerto Rico right now, all the resorts have water, but the people don't have water. So the stadium that Bad Bunny is going to be in is going to have electricity and water. And down the street, there'll be people without electricity and water. And that colonization is not just like decolonizing the land. The amount of work we as Boricuas, especially Black Puerto Ricans, have to be like, yo, do you not understand that as this is crumbling, it's going to be so harder? Because when the empire was like good, it was still hard and horrible for our people on the islands. So for me, the water crisis, it's a crisis of colonialism that only gets solved when there is no colonialism. And so many younger Boricuas have been like, we can't govern ourselves. I'm like, you sound crazy. I'm going to send you a lot of articles, because Panaba Vicente Alba always said, young people, it's up to you. you got to change the minds of our own people that think without the United States, we can't govern ourselves, as opposed to saying we can totally govern ourselves and join the international world. But Kali, as it regards just water in general, there's been water shortages all over South Africa and stuff. But I think when it comes right in maybe the colony, that people are just like, I'm gonna go down and I'm gonna get water. And I'm like, oh my God, there's so many plastic bottles. Like, where's all this plastic gonna go? Or what's happening? Or how can people act like I love Puerto Rico but not care? And I think that the dissonance is like what's jarring me, because also it's an island nation and it's going to be the Caribbean that's also going to suffer along with the Gulf Coast with these continued climate catastrophe. But if you could kind of bridge that with then waters, if the politicians are saying it's a water shortage, what should be what we are like? What language should we be using to make sure we're very focused on this climate catastrophe and what indigenous and African descendant people are doing, not just in the United States, but around the world to deal with this?
Whew.
I know.
Look, number one, recognize that this is the coldest summer that you're going to experience the rest of your life.
This summer.
This summer. This is the coldest summer you're going to experience the rest of your life.
Not as opposed, but tangentially on what happened in Europe, it's the hottest in Spain.
Every year, it's going to get hotter.
And then we here in the north, like
everywhere, Rosa, everywhere. This is the coldest winter, summer, spring, fall for the rest of your life. It is going to get hotter every year, right? All the projections, the things that we are experiencing now, by the most, advanced projections that they were putting out 25, even 10 years ago, most of that said that these impacts really wouldn't be kicking in really until like the mid 2030s on some accounts. But like the major effects wouldn't be kicking in 2050. We are now seeing continuous, kind of 100-year flood events, 100-year fire events, El Ninos, and
can you explain to people what that is? El Nino.
It's a weather pattern, dictated by, in part, the kind of the off cycle, the rotation of the sun, how heat is collected and then moved around, particularly from the Pacific Ocean to be diffused around the rest of the world. The oceans now are basically boiling and becoming acidic everywhere. Which means a heavy extinction event it's already been happening, but it's going to accelerate, where the oceans, like a lot of our forests now, are not able to be carbon sinks. They're not able to pull that in, and like some plants that are on land and terrestrial now. They're emitting more carbon than they actually take in to produce more oxygen. We already know this from some of the plant cycle that folks are looking at in the big forests in the Amazon, in Canada, and in Russia in particular. The oceans are starting in part to do the same. The phytoplankton cycle is collapsing. That's all the little bitty for folks who are not familiar with the microorganisms, that form the basis of what we might remember, what they taught a lot of us in school as the food chain, right? The one of the core basis of that everything from like the biggest whales, eat, and then how, the fish and the shrimp and everything else eat as the basis of the complex food chains, which you need to sustain an ecological balance so that oxygen, hydrogen, carbon stay in balance to reproduce life as we have grown to understand it. Right? I'm trying to not over scientific, black nerded, but basically it's a major cycle, and this is, I think, the second largest ever recorded, or this is projected to be the second largest ever recorded. And what that means, like on the one hand, like down here in the deep South, like in the dirty South, that means on the one hand, it's absorbing a lot of the water temperature and the pressure from the Atlantic Ocean, which means there'll be less hurricanes, or at least projected this year. And so far, that's held true, right? But that means that there's a major severe drought down in the South, right? Because we're not getting the same water pressure, right? And the same kind of admixture. And what it also means, particularly for like the more temperate zones, and that's kind of moving further and further up, it means massive dryness this year and probably into next. And that's going to be major fires on a scale that we are, if you look around the world right now, the world is burning. They're not reporting it in the same way they were, I think about 2 or 3 years ago. Large parts, because now it's this year is far more Europe and Central Asia than it has been like Canada or the Pacific Northwest. But they're being hit too, right? I think there's just been some very conscious and deliberate choices on the U.S. media to downplay the extent of the fires in the environment this year. But if you look at Canadian media, they're not downplaying because they can't afford it. That's where the brunt, at least in North America, where the brunt of the fires are. But it's still the beginning of August, and this season extends all the way typically until September. Well, now, that is extending further, and what you will see more of. Remember what just took place. What was in the beginning of last year, where in Los Angeles had one of the worst fires on record in California, and that's saying something. That was in December and January
of last year,
the winter.
Yeah,
you had that forest fire. So just put that in perspective of what we think of the seasons. And this El Nino is only going to make everything, at least in North American context, drier, right, and more fire prone, with the exception, oddly enough, of California. So California, it should be expecting, I think the projections are, in parts of Oregon, California and Oregon, should be expecting these, what they call these atmospheric rivers, which are going to lead to these massive floods on account of the El Nino kind of effect.
Yeah, and in Puerto Rico, which I didn't realize, there's wildfires. So I'm like, Puerto Rico wildfire because of the drought, and the drought because of climate catastrophe, and then the drought because of the global south. And then here in Albany, New York, like we're maybe 5 hours away from the Canadian border. So there's a lot of news in this area that's like, there's a fire here, this is happening, kind of thing.
No, look, the point being, I'm glad, because I was going to go to Puerto Rico and fires being there, because that's something that hasn't been reported enough.
It's very strange.
We in for one hell of a struggle that's being downplayed. And if you look at it, one of the things the Trump regime has done most effectively is, in effect, kill, the climate movement. Right? If you just think about it, what people were calling the climate justice movement from, the 2019s to the early 2020s, that has basically been eviscerated. Right? It's kind of the triumph of all that, if you want to call it that, was the Biden administration and kind of the Build Back Better piece. And I'm trying to do this as a link to AOC, so you understand how much of what she's given up. Right?
Right.
She was one of the co-sponsors of the Green New Deal.
Right.
That was one of the things that she came in as a freshman. Do you hear her talking about that anymore?
Absolutely not.
Is there any mention of that anymore? So when it ain't just black people that she's throwing under the bus, she done threw away her own fucking legacy, because that's what she came in on. So we just bring it back full circle. So
Yeah.
was the Green New Deal woke one and too woke? That's why she don't talk about it no more. So put all of it in the broad comprehension of, who and what gets jettisoned, and then put in the fact Puerto Rico is primarily black and brown people by how we categorize folks. So you throwing your own folks under the bus by jettisoning the agenda that, if you to continue to advance, would have been in the primary interest of your own people.
And that's why I was like, at first, I'm deleting this, the not the article, the title. And then I woke up like, you didn't say nothing about the climate catastrophe, which is the reason that this is happening. And then I said to myself, this flag right here, that's my loyalty. That's who I'm loyal to. My people, my island, the rest of the world. And that, Kali, you're naming the fact that everything is coming faster. So we're dealing with a climate catastrophe. We're dealing with so much disinformation, misinformation. I wanted you to talk about, because I feel I'm understanding a lot more around kind of people in this country and are like rising up against data centers. And here, in New York State, there's been 11 prisons that have closed. So New York State at one time, no, California first, New York State second, had the most open correctional facilities, all the way from Westchester County to the Buffalo Canadian border. You're talking 12-hour trip, right? And they've been closing because there have been policies enacted specifically in these places in New York City to not incarcerate, right? In that vein. So some of the communities here in upstate New York so against the data centers. And what I was realizing at a meeting is like maybe like middle class or people that have some political knowledge, because then these upstate cities in the state of New York who have lost prisons are like, oh, bring it on so we can have jobs. But can you tell people and just like relay what resources does a data center take away from the community that they are in?
Start number one with water, since that's what we're on about, talking about Puerto Rico and the colonial crisis. Yeah. There's a water crisis, right? Water, right? They're going to suck up, probably 1/4 of the water consumed in any particular region where they are, where they have a footprint within. And that means there's less of it. So you will see in some places as time goes on, the same type of policies being enacted in a lot of these rural counties that this woman is forcing on Puerto Rico right now, right? When you get the folks aren't familiar that want to listen, the way the policy is structured right now, you get to have water for 2 days where you can access it
every 48 hours.
And then 2 days you can't, right? Expect some of that to come this way. I'm just putting it out there right now. And
no,
I
was talking about, I don't know what city it was on Threads, where this young brother was like, water crisis, calamity, prisons and all this kind of things he was naming. And he, as a Generation Z, were like, I got to read a lot more. But he's like, on top of that, we're finding Black women hung and then Black young men just being killed. Like all of it together.
Yep. So that's talking about going back to that one point.
Yeah.
So water, your water drainage, then you're gonna have to pay more for it. Number 2, right? Mm-hmm. Then the other piece, just being quick, is electricity, and this is probably the part that has sparked the most initial kind of protest, because a lot of places, they're necessarily gonna notice in the short term, water shortage, unless you're like a farmer or something like that. You're not going to notice that until it becomes really acute. But you will notice your electrical bill going up, $1, $2, $10, $50, $100, paycheck after paycheck, bill after bill. That is what most folks, you follow the kind of pattern of what's kind of waking a lot of folks up regardless of their political affiliation, of like, in a time where there's massive inflation, this is even before the assault on Iran, bills started going up, and a larger part of the general inflation, both from Biden and from Trump, folks started noticing that and trying to figure out, well, why is it? I'm not using more energy than I was before. Why are the rates changing, right? And it was because of the data centers. People in the local community started putting one and two together, often from some activists doing and journalists doing their work, raising questions, educating people as best they could. But that is going to continue to rise as long as these data centers keep getting erected. And they're doing it in such a way where we have to foot the bill, right? Because oftentimes with the tax breaks that they get under the incentives that they're kind of, bringing jobs or stimulating the economy,
Yeah.
Local, county, state officials are giving them all these different kind of breaks, allowing them to bypass environmental codes and enforcement, to not have to do environmental impact studies, like what Trump did. You're not even letting them off the hook for all the things against the acid rain legislation that got enacted in the 1970s, because he's deemed this, him and the class interest that he represents, right, and the billionaires and trillionaires that he represents, they have made this a priority as a means by which they can, continue to rule over the world capitalist system and defeat their rival, i.e. the Chinese, and their particular variation of going this. So when you hear Trump say, this is of the utmost national, security interest, he's not lying. He's not exaggerating, at least from the point of view, as they see it, of them having to win the war against China.
Right. And also they're like, this, they don't care, but they're also like, this is what's happening. We're going to get away with it. But they're putting it in their own report. So as we wind down, man,
But one thing related to this, I want folks to grasp and bring it full circle.
Yeah.
Of how weak, the U.S. economy has been coming out of COVID, and how restructured it has been.
Yeah.
Right?
Can you speak to that? Because people right now, Kali, are also like, we're all experiencing inflation. And I must say, definitely a point of privilege for me. This is the first time in my life where I'm like, why is my my national grid bill $400? Right. Second, we should have been prepared as kind of the hip hop generation. But third, I think people fear what they don't know. And I think what's important to note, people who want to be organized, is that it takes maybe decades for something to latch on and like, okay, it really speaks to Cooperation Jackson for almost 20 years. It's confronting a crisis, but it's building that mutual aid, which means a lot of other things. But I think for the most part, people feel like they cannot do something. And I'm just like, you can do something, support an organization. But as we move where we're moving to, what happens? Like, these November primaries happen. Okay, that's the electoral political space. What would be a couple of things that you would be telling and specifically younger people? Because you always say this, like, young people are always going to tell you the truth. First, like, what would you say to, like, how do we stay engaged and not kind of let all of this be a depressive thing, as well as share all of Cooperation Jackson? And I tell everybody all the time, I'm really lucky right now in upstate New York. I got Soul Fire Farm, I got Black Liberation Farm, I got Wild Seed. And I keep telling everybody in New York, bring your organizations, see what's happening, right? Or then at least model some of your work around what Cooperation Jackson has done. Because as you built the organization, all of you have shown the mechanisms of how they in their own community can link to the work y'all are doing and implement what people really understand as self-determination and cooperative economics.
Well, I mean, I know you're trying to wrap up. That's a long conversation.
I don't have a deadline. You probably have a deadline.
I do. I do, unfortunately. Look, I want to, not trying to do a shameless plug, but I want to encourage folks to check out the Build and Fight series that we put out last year. And you can find it, here, Tanya Caesar with Rootwork was the co-host of that piece, of what we did. And so you can find it on Black Liberation Media or Jackson Rising and a couple of other outlets that you can, Democracy at Work, you can find it there. We wound up doing, I think it was 10 shows in all. So you can check that out. Check out some also the for shorter kind of distilled pieces of that. My comrades over at the social media, the People's Network for Land and Liberation, are doing, I think, an excellent job of coming out with weekly posts and really breaking the formula down in the little bite-sized pieces. So definitely kind of check that out. But the one thing I think right now that I want to just highlight from something that you said that I really want to particularly aim at young people, and a role that I think that me and you can play. We have to create spaces where folks can be social. That's one of the key things that we need right now, right? Because, folks often feel hopeless and I think somewhat isolated. And I'm going by what I heard you, what I'm trying to bring back is what I heard you talking about this generation and the influence of social media, what they're calling a social media, right? The only thing social about it is there's a lot of people there. But it is not a substitute for people actually getting together and being in that, forming the basis of building relationships and organizing. And one of the particular pieces that the neoliberal project, right, neoliberalism being a variant of capitalism, focusing on hyper individuality amongst any other features. One of the things that it has been so successful at in social media has provided it with one of the greatest tools is atomizing us and fracturing us so that all of our engagement is only superficial, right? Mm-hmm. It winds up being, a debate to whatever extent you can really have that. I'm looking at this chat thing along the side going on, and there's seems to be an active dialogue and some trolling going there from what I read from a couple of them going there that we're going to probably need to figure out how to address a little bit better going forward, Rosa. But, the chat is helpful because it allows people from wherever to chime in, and people can make their commentary and even give long analysis. It is not a substitute for actual debate. It is not an actual substitute for actual conversation, right? Because I can't tell sometimes if somebody, or nor you or anybody, is this person serious? Are they joking? And I would need to know them and, what kind of body language, what is their posture, where, to really be able to read more of the situation about what they mean and what they intend by what they are saying and what they are writing. And we are going to need that because the thing that in order for us to deal with the crisis that's coming, and right, that is here for many people already, to think that you are going to kind of have some white survival bunker mentality, way
I
of
want
driving this. That's not going to work for us, right? We don't have the resources to have about 10 years of food stored up. Most of us don't, right? That don't exist. And then if I know you, in the neighborhood I live in, if I know you got 10 years of food, best believe, and I ain't got enough food, I'm coming to your house to take this shit, right? Yeah. So the only way you get past that is, hey, let's get to know each other. Doesn't mean we ain't got to agree and all this or even like each other to a certain extent, but I want my neighborhood and my children and the elderly folks to be safe and secure in the midst of a crisis, which means I got to get to know folks and let's have some conversation around how do we take care of each other. In the South, in a lot of places, even in so-called urban areas, we have the benefits of having yards. I'm going to bring up one of the slogans that we've been trying to popularize, right? And particularly to kind of deal with the crisis at hand. It sounds, maybe minute, but I want folks to look into the deeper aspect of it. And that's the piece that we've been promoting. Turn every yard into a farm and every garage, if you got one, right, into kind of a mini factory, right? To be able collectively to work with folks in a particular way that we can have the kind of autonomous means to deal with the crisis at hand and not have things go crazy, right? Not have, folks literally being malnourished or starving in some of our communities because there's no food. We cannot be reliant anymore. I think we hopefully, as many of us learned that during the pandemic, particularly the first 6 months, there could come a time when the grocery store is not an option. And I would argue, y'all, it's already here, right? Because you got a government, because of Doge and the very strategic cuts that it is trying to make. Remember, Trump said, I'm not going to pay for no more child care and hospitalization. Yeah. That's something the states could do because we got to go fight wars. That came out the man's mouth. All right. Yeah. So be clear what they planning on doing.
Look, just so people understand real quick, what we're saying is that there's now the defunding of things around community gardens. Let's grow our own food. Those organizations had funding. I'm just saying here, and I'm saying here, they've had funding. Now that the funding is gone, those spaces are gone too.
But they don't. I think the particular pieces, what we were trying to impart, is that they don't have to be. And if anything, if anybody learns a lesson from us, and I don't think it's too late from this.
Yeah.
One of the reason, if you want to call it under my stewardship, was always like, I'm not renting no land from nobody. We're going to buy it. And we're going to make a priority to buy it. And that often left us, by focusing in on buying, we often not have enough time to pay people, right? But we put a priority on the long-term control and ownership of land will give us the ability, even when times are tough, to produce food for ourselves, to have housing for ourselves. So it was a commitment to a longer-term vision, kind of anticipating, being a student of history and economics, that a crash is coming, right? And there's so much ground I wanted to cover. But one of the pieces I want to go to, yes, there's all that. Cooperation Jackson is being massively defunded right now, right? Like that's something we are experiencing. But because of the ownership, we ain't dealing with it the same way I think some of the I'm hearing, you talk about. So it's like, I got land. We had a water crisis. We built up a level of water storage to be able to do a certain degree of autonomy with that we have capacity to do, that we tried to forecast and build. I wish we would have had more, but we at least have a basis to do some level of, what we have, a food production with what we have, and we're still going to try to amass more. So I think there's what we've been trying to put out with, like, even the build and fight stuff, is kind of a step-by-step graduated way to become more autonomous, self-reliant, and self-sufficient. And that's why I want folks to go back to that particular piece and really study up on it. If there's any contribution you take for us, and there's just trying to drop these little ideas of, like, if you got a yard, you got some capacity.
Grow
in most places, not to grow something. Start growing, right? And that's a micro. But if you can convince your neighbor, right, on your block, let's say there's 5 or 6 blocks, if all of y'all are doing that, then you get to some level of cooperation and planning. I'm gonna grow this, you grow that. We can trade, we can barter, right? We can do these things over time. We're gonna have to get back to this level, I think, given the nature of it, because you got to make another link where I was going a second ago. We just had this whole, projectile poop situation from the Taylor Farms.
The Taylor Farm salad. Yeah.
But people need to recognize that's because Trump and them cut all of the government agencies that did the regulation to monitor the
FDA and the agriculture. They're like, we can't even check anything anymore.
You're in a situation now because of the capitalist nature of production, right? Where it's quantity over quality, right? And they will use whatever they can, most of them, right, to just get it out, right, under whatever conditions. Often, if you really think about them farms, it's basically slave-like conditions that a lot of our folks are working under. Then when you marry that with, a lot of the folks who this system structurally has created a dependency upon for all these migrant workers and immigrant workers, right? So think about if you in that position and you worried about ICE cracking down on you, and that's systematically what they was doing in Mexico. I mean, in California with some of the same operations. When you think about what quality is going to be produced and what kind of short steps, the ICE raids, the cutting down on the FDA and all these other government regulations creates massive food vulnerability. So all these different issues are linked, and it this very intentional dismantling of what little social, kind of welfare state, if you want to call it that the United States has, that they are on a kind of the total mission to dismantle. I was just reading earlier today, they're recalling jalapenos, right, for salmonella right now on the same account, right?
Mhm.
So this is only going to get worse because of the orientation in the political alignment and the commitment of this particular administration, which means if we want to stay healthy and sane, we have no choice but to start producing more for ourselves. And I want to encourage everybody to start, taking that task seriously.
Yeah, and thank you everybody. So Kali, I'm always going to bring back Kali, but really around us now also trusting, and that's what I think. I'm like, we need to seek out and trust organizations that are doing the work, like Cooperation Jackson, like whatever disposable income, give it to Soul Fire Farm, Liberation Farm, Wild Sea, give it to Cooperation Jackson, give it to people in Puerto Rico who are doing and kind of preparing. But I did, as I let you go, somebody said, which it always speaks to how beautiful our people are in this world, not just this world, the world, then not just empires, the American empire, and it's at LAW1. Hopefully we all can meet in the world we want to win. And that's what I think is the most important thing that we also impart to younger people. Like, younger people now in this movement space know about political prisoners. Some of them grew up going to these events. Maybe their friends didn't. And I always told Alicia, I said, what we have to recognize is this. The freedom of political prisoners in this last decade didn't just happen. It was something that for 2 decades, especially coming out of Malcolm X grassroots movement, coming out of the hip hop generation, coming out of these spaces, was like, we were writing letters for 20 years. And then one day something broke through. And then that first PP came out, and then the next one, and then the next one, and the next one, when we started to use the electoral space to be like, listen, you want our vote? I'm going to need you to release these prisoners. What made, quote, Obama release Oscar Lopez Rivera? Because the Puerto Rican community that put Obama into office said, at the end of the day, when you leave, you're going to have to do this, and we're going to hold you accountable. Movements, we don't win every day, but then there are wins. And I think with a younger generation, is you can explain it in 60 seconds, they're going to tune out. But also within our generation and then the millennials, I always say, don't say Obama freed Oscar Lopez, say the people freed Oscar Lopez and Obama signed that form. And I know it's hard. I know it's hard when everybody is like, I don't know, food. I don't know if I'm going to have a job. So I'm wondering, as we wrap up with your interview, and thank you for staying 30 extra minutes. I love you. How people can reach you and kind of like that last message to a younger generation that might not have grown up in the movement or their parents aren't in the movement.
I would say, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I'm sure y'all done heard that before, but it's true, right? That don't mean some sprinting is not required from time to time. But at the end of the day, it is a marathon, not a sprint. And think about long-term positionality and the grind that you got to do over a long period of time to get where you want to go. And despite how bad, things are becoming, we faced bad before. So don't get daunted by that. I always try to remind people, it's looking bleak, but imagine how bleak it was in the belly of them slave ships. So just let that ground you. You know what I'm saying? Our people have been through crisis before, and we found a way to survive and thrive in them. Now I think we're trying to, set a foundation for the next generation to pick up the torch and actually finally win. And I'm defining win as being able, first and foremost, to dismantle the capitalist world system and all the supporting institutions that help erect it: white supremacy, patriarchy, heterosexism, all those different things. We got some serious work to dismantle. And it's not, we may weaken one, but just weakening one without trying to consciously and deliberately weaken the others at the same time leaves backdoor entries for them to regroup and get stronger. And that part of Trump is we didn't put a firm stake in the heart of white supremacy, and it was allowed to regroup, reposition itself because too many compromises, were made all around and allowing, basically, neo-Confederates and fascists to kind of have a ground when it should have just totally been removed from them. So there's a lesson to be learned from that. You learn as much as oftentimes more from your defeats than you do from your victories, because sometimes victory is just a matter of luck, not a matter of that you did everything right. You just got lucky, right? But the defeats will teach you, hey, I didn't do this right. I didn't do this right. We messed up here. We miscalculated there. So study them seriously and don't get, too dissuaded by it. Because, we are facing some daunting
times. I watch every apocalyptic show. I'm like, I want to see the zombies. I want to see all of that. But
they've been preparing us for a minute. The last thing I do got to run.
Everybody your information.
The last thing I do got to run. So for folks to get a hold of me, you can find me on old people social media, as I've been told it is, on Facebook. Where else am I at? I still have account. No, I had to stop it with it. To me, Twitter and Instagram, that was the limit. I'm like, one more password, I'm good. But you can find me there. You can reach me by email at Akuno at gmail.com for anything personally, politically. Specifically for Cooperation Jackson, email me at kali@cooperationjackson.org. And you can, we have a page that you can find some of our historical information on the website. We're migrating and redoing it as we speak, create a new one. But you can find us at cooperationjackson.org. And you can follow us on X, Instagram at cooperation@JXN, and on Facebook at Cooperation Jackson. You can follow our YouTube page, which is Jackson Rising. And we do have a TikTok and some other things, thankfully the Tom DeCizwe helped put together for us. So you can find us.
You can find us, yeah. Well, thank you giving me extra time because you're like as Rosa. But I also feel like, I think as we wind down to the summer and everybody begins to adjust to the fall, I do think that this last year has given us some really good moments. So I love you. Thank you.
Love you too. Catch you soon.
Talk to you soon. So hey everybody. Thank you everybody on Facebook. I know it was man long. My show literally ends in like 30 seconds. So I'm really grateful that Kali, thank you everybody on Instagram. So the last thing I want to say is, with everything on the show today, my seminar, The Black Puerto Rican Radical Tradition, kicks off in September. There is a fee. DM me all of it. Tell me if you like the show and other things. And everybody who made comments, I really appreciate it. Hey, Leah. Hey, everybody who made comments. Thank you. I think I'm always going to now be more positive than usual and say every day we can do something small or big, but every day we can do something. And I hope that this show does something for you. And I hope also that where we're seeing really radical, reporting and all that, not just like clickbait, that in itself and watching it is an organizing tool as well. You know what I'm saying? So thank you everybody for being here. Please like and subscribe to Black Liberation Media, and please subscribe to my Substack. I'm not charging right now. I really don't like this idea of brand. I have just found it to be kind of liberating to write what I want to write and put it up on my own terms, and maybe people feel like that again. So yeah, I will see you next Wednesday. Although people on Instagram know I might come up. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but I really appreciate everybody. And if you want to donate, all of that is available on my Instagram page. So yeah, peace everybody. Have a good night. Peace.